everyone. I want to welcome you back to the afternoon session. I hope you've had a good time, a good lunch. I hope the queue wasn't too long. Bear with us, and eventually got to you. So we're going to have another amazing session this afternoon, and just a few announcements. My name is Temi Tokwe, and I'm the MC, obviously. And so there will be networking at the Space Bar downstairs from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. So don't miss out of it. You can be part of it after now. Then there's last chance reminder to enter the competition in your booklets. So just check your booklet. There's a competition going on. Don't miss out. You stand a chance of winning something amazing. Right, so you can check it out. So we're ready for the next speaker. Right, so the next speaker, Faye, is a principal training architect at Pluralsight and an AWS community builder, helping organizations and individuals develop AWS skills to drive cloud transformation. With a background as a principal infrastructure architect, she has worked with major financial institutions like the New York Stock Exchange and Bank of America. All right, so the title of the talk for today is Using Generative AI and the Python to Remove Personal Identifiable Information from Your Data. Are we ready to learn about that? So welcome with me, Faye. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Wow, there's so many of you. It's lovely to see you all. Thank you for that introduction. So my name is Faye Ellis. I'm a principal training architect at Pluralsight, it's a training company. I've worked in IT for about 20 years, and prior to Pluralsight, I was part of A Cloud Guru, another training company, smaller one. But for about 6 years, I've been working in training. Passionate about all things cloud, particularly AWS. And in my time, I've worked in lots of different kind of techie roles as a sysadmin, DevOps, architect, all in financial services. Based in London, which is another reason why it's so wonderful to be here and to be doing an in-person talk here in my hometown. So everyone, welcome to London if you're not from London, and it's wonderful to see you all. So my talk is going to be about using generative AI and Python to remove personally identifiable information from your data. It's very codey, so I've got lots of code to show you, but it's very accessible. None of it's difficult. I guarantee you will all understand it, and you will go away feeling energized by Python. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about all of the different services that I'm going to be using in my code. So first, Amazon Bedrock, which is an API interface into generative AI models in AWS. Cloud9, which is the IDE that I'm using. The AWS Software Developer Kit for Python, it's called Boto 3. The Converse API, which is another little API that makes it very easy to interact with these large language models in AWS. We're going to review the code together, and we'll walk through it line by line. We'll run my little demo. It takes about 5 minutes. I'll give you my resources so that you can try this at home. It costs you a fraction of a dollar to try this at home for yourself, and it will take you probably 15 minutes to do at home. I've got a book recommendation for you. If you're like me and you like the old-fashioned way sometimes to step away from the screen, I've got a nice book recommendation that I'll talk to you about. And we'll definitely have time for some Q&A as well. Okay, so what is Amazon Bedrock? Well, it's an API endpoint and an API interface into large language models that are provided by AWS. So these are pre-trained models, and they've got so many different ones to offer. So there's a variety of models, and you can just select the one that's right for your use case, depending on what you're trying to do. It's completely serverless, which means that there's no infrastructure needed. So in order to use these models and to build an application that's using generative AI, you don't need to actually install any virtual machines, operating systems, configure networks and subnets and that kind of thing. It's just talking to the application programming interface. Of course, that's going to reduce the operational heavy lifting, because it means that if you started to get a project off the ground, you've got that billion-dollar idea, you don't need to start installing and configuring operating systems. Accelerating your time to market and getting your idea out there. So the advantages of using this kind of a service is that you can try lots of new things, fail quickly. If something doesn't work, throw it away, and you try something new, basically. So you've got a majorly reduced upfront time to development in terms of your own time in getting something up and running, and in terms of the kind of cash flow as well. Now, as you know, AWS and Amazon.com have decades of experience with AI and machine learning. Every time you log into Amazon.com, of course, you're bombarded with the other things that they're recommending. And under the hood, that's all been using AI. The kind of technologies that we're seeing today, having been developed over the previous 2 decades. We're just seeing it. We're all seeing it now because it's kind of come to the fore and it's just available for everybody now. Okay, when it comes to security, I know you're all data people, you're all very worried about security, and of course for every organization now, data is our kind of golden asset and the thing that we need to protect. So with Bedrock, they've built in security, so any prompts that we write to the large language models, any resources we provide, it's all encrypted over the network when we're using it all within the Amazon kind of ecosystem. They say that your data is never used to retrain the base model, and when these technologies first came out, there was a very famous example of a company where the engineers were providing things like meeting notes, proprietary information, providing their code to a large language model, the OpenAI ChatGPT, the public endpoint, and of course that data, they've lost it forever. It's within the model, been used to retrain the model. And of course, it integrates with loads of different AWS services. So you can build, when you build using AWS, you can actually leverage all of the other security elements that they have around, things like the virtual private cloud, AWS Private Link, which is an internal network, which means that when some of the communication, you can configure it to not go out to the internet. It can stay all within your Amazon account. And of course, you can provide custom data as well, stored in services like S3 or in some of their databases and data warehouses or queuing systems. So you can really make sure that you keep things very secure by building within a cloud provider. And of course, Google and Azure provide very similar services as well. It's not all about AWS. So they're providing a selection of different models from all of the major providers, and Amazon also have their own set of large language models called Titan, including kind of lighter weight models for simpler use cases. So it doesn't always have to be, a great big hammer to crack a nut. So models, a complete selection of models from different industry leaders, and you can select the right one for your particular requirements of your organization or your project. So you might be looking for something that's, on the more affordable side, something that's more compact if you've got just a very simple use case. Think about use cases like simple chatbots. They don't need to be the most sophisticated models in order to just answer, basic questions. You might be looking for a balance of price and performance, or you might really want the latest and greatest and the best thing possible. So you might want high performance for a very complex task and be prepared to pay the price for it as well. Okay, so Cloud9. What is Cloud9? Well, it's a browser-based IDE, or integrated developer environment. And this is, you'll see it in action when I show you the demo. So it allows you, as a developer, to write code, debug it, view it, format it, and then actually run the code as well. So I'll be using Cloud9 later on. It comes with a load of different pre-installed tools, which means I don't have to install things on my own local machine or install different versions of Python, etc., and create a big headache for myself next time I need another version. So it's something where you can actually just utilize it from the get-go, really, because it includes things like the Amazon command line interface for interacting with the different resources and services in AWS, as well as support for popular programming languages like Java, JavaScript, Python, C++, and Ruby. Okay, the next thing we'll be using in my demo is the AWS SDK, or Software Development Kit for Python. It's called Boto 3. And this just allows code. If you write a Python script, that particular library is going to allow you to interact with different services in AWS. And in my demo, we'll be interacting with the Bedrock service to talk to the generative AI models. But you could easily just be interacting with a database in AWS or another data store. It could be S3. You could be building EC2 instances, etc. And you can do that kind of thing with these SDKs. Okay, so the Converse API, it's another part of the Bedrock API. It was announced quite recently, just over maybe within the last 6 months. So this simplifies the interaction with text-based generative AI models. And it gives us a very consistent way to talk to all these different types of models. Instead of learning lots of different ways to interact with different models from different vendors, the idea is we learn just one consistent way. And that means that when we write our code, we can write our code once to seamlessly interact with different model vendors. And if we decide that we want to pivot and change to a different vendor, it's minimal code changes in order to do that. So this makes it a lot easier to experiment with different models and to try something new when a new version comes out, so that you can just really find the best one for your use case. And what's new today, of course, is old news. In a few weeks' time, when something new comes out, you can then very easily update the code, and we'll see that in the demo as well. Okay, so my little application, it's using the AWS SDK for Python and the Converse API to interact with Amazon Bedrock. And Bedrock is serving us or giving us access to the Claude model within the Anthropic Claude model, so the model that we define within the code. And then that's coming back with the response. So that's it kind of at a high level. So let's review the code together. Right, so we start off by importing the AWS SDK for Python, and we're importing JSON as well, because we're going to, when we get the interaction back and we get the message back, we want it to be using JSON to print out the message at the end. Next, we're starting a Boto 3 session. And what this does is it will store configuration state for our session, but it also allows us to create and interact with the AWS resources. Next, we're creating a Bedrock runtime client instance, and it's this client that's used to send the API calls to the different AI models within Bedrock. Next, I'm defining an empty message list, and this is going to be used to pass messages into the model. And then later on in the next page, we'll be actually creating the message. Okay, sorry, this is a bit texty, but it's basically me creating the message that we're going to pass into the model. So this is the message that I want to send into the model. It's actually meeting notes, an example of some meeting notes between me and my manager. It's got a lot of personally identifiable information in there, so it's got my address. It's got my phone number in there as well. So I want to use ask the large language model to actually remove that personally identifiable information from my meeting notes. And that's that piece in purple where I'm asking it to redact the PII and send me back the sanitized version. And this is quite a simple kind of a use case. We could be, instead of providing that message in this format, as I am in the demo, we could be ingesting that message from a queue or taking some data from S3, from the data store. It could be coming from a database, for example. But for the purposes of this, I'm just kind of plugging it in there. Okay, so that's my message. And as I explained earlier, we can easily modify this code. So if we wanted to change that message and get the large language model to do something completely different, we would just need to change what's being input at this message level. So in the next step, that message is getting appended into my message list. Down here, we're making the API call to the Bedrock Converse API. And we're also providing the model ID of the model that we want to use. So I'm starting off with Anthropic Claude version 2. Of course, when version 3, 4, 5 comes out, I can change that. And this is actually the beauty of the Converse API.
Do you need Anthropic credentials separately, or does that happen?
You don't need credentials because the Bedrock service is managing all of that for you, and it's actually creating a private instance of the large language model, so you're not reaching out to anything on a remote server somewhere that you need to have credentials for. Thank you for the question. Okay, there's our message that we're appending to the. We're telling it where's the message coming from, and that's the parameter. So these next set of parameters here, you might recognize them, and I wonder if somebody would like to guess what, or tell me what any of these mean. So first of all, this is where we're defining the inference parameters. So these are the parameters that are going to go into the large language model, and we can change these as well. So max tokens, can anyone make a guess at what that might mean, or does anyone know what that might mean?
Is that the token window?
Yes.
That you're communicating for input and output?
Yes, you win a sticker for that. Well done. Thank you. Okay, so that one is the maximum number of tokens in the generated response, because we don't want it to go on for days and days and days. What about temperature? Does anyone know for a sticker? Temperature, yes?
For a sticker. So basically, simply said, how creative do you want it?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. How creative or how random you want it to be. And this doesn't, temperature doesn't really particularly apply within this use case, because we don't want it to be creative about what we think personally identifiable information is. But if we were trying to get it to help us write a blog post or a short story, we probably would want it to be more creative. Okay, what about top P? Yes?
Top population of tokens that you want to infer from, or like a subset of tokens that you want to consider?
Yes. It's a really hard one to explain, okay? So this is how I try to explain it to myself. It defines the percentage most likely candidates to select for text generation. And if I give an example, so 0.1 means 10%. So if we give it a top P of 10%, it will select the top 10% of most likely candidates or tokens that should come next in its text generation. Can I pass back? Would you mind passing my sticker back? Thank you. Okay. Then the last bit, so this is where the actual stuff happens. We're invoking the Bedrock Converse API using all of these parameters that we provided. And then right at the end, we're telling it that we want it to print out the result. Okay. So that's my code. And it's time to kind of move on to the demo. So if you want to try this at home, there are a few prerequisites. First, you need an AWS account. You can get one of those for free. They do a very generous free tier. Most of this stuff you could do for free. You will pay for inference from the large language models, but it's a fraction of $1. We need to, in order to use these models, they don't enable them by default. You have to go in and explicitly enable them for your account. So these are the ones that I'm using in the demo, and they support removing personally identifiable information. Some of the models don't. An IDE of some sort, it doesn't have to be Cloud9, but I like Cloud9. If you use the Ubuntu version, it will have everything needed. You need the AWS CLI command line interface installed on the IDE. It comes already on Cloud9, so you'll be fine with that. And the latest AWS SDK for Python on the IDE. That's also included on Cloud9. Okay. And you need the code. That's important too. So I put my code in a GitHub repository. But I will share all the resources again afterwards. Okay. So demo, about 5 minutes long. Let's watch. From the AWS console, I'll search for Bedrock and select it. Then, using the menu on the left, I'm going to scroll down until I find Model Access, down here. Now this page just shows which models I've got access to in this account, and they don't automatically enable any of the models, so you need to explicitly request access for the ones that you want to use. Now I want all of the Claude models, so I'm going to search for Claude up here. And there's one here that I don't have access to yet. And this is a fairly new one that they've just added recently. So I'm going to request access by scrolling up and selecting Modify Model Access. And then I can search up here using the model name, select the one that I want to add, hit Next, and Submit. And then after that, I'll be able to use this model as well. So next, I'm going to create my Cloud9 instance. I'm going to search for Cloud9. Create environment. I'll give it a name. Under the hood, of course, it's using an EC2 instance. I'll stick with the defaults. But the platform type is going to be Ubuntu, because I want to run the Ubuntu operating system. Then I'll scroll down to the bottom and create. After the Cloud9 instance is ready, I'm going to select Open. And it's going to begin my Cloud9 session. And there we are. I'll close down the welcome screen. And then the first thing to do is install Boto 3. So I'll run pip install Boto 3. After that, I'm going to download my code from GitHub, and it's only one file, so I'm going to do that using curl. And I'm saving the file locally on my IDE. And there's my file. So next, we can run the code and see if it all works. And if it works, it's going to print my message with all the personally identifiable information removed. And there we go, it's done it. Now we can also run this same code using a different model by replacing the model ID in our code. So I'll select the code, there it is. Scroll down to our model ID, and I'm replacing the model ID. Save my file. Then back in my terminal, we can run the code again. And there we go, it still works, and it's using the different model this time. And we can test again using the new version of Sonnet that we just added. And there we go, it still works. So when a new version of a model comes out, we just replace our model ID in here. We can play around with the inference configuration down here if we want to. And we could also play around with the message as well and change the message and see what's possible with the models. Finally, I'll clean everything up by terminating my Cloud9 instance. So I'll head to Cloud9, select my environment, and delete. And if you do this in your own account, it's going to cost you a fraction of $1. There we are. Well, the beauty of recording a demo, you don't have to stress out about it not working. Okay, so my takeaways. Why did I do this thing? Creating a conversational application, seeing what's possible, and for me, it was an exercise in understanding how to write an application that's actually interacting with these kind of models. So how do I write a Python application that sends and receives messages from my generative AI model? We can observe results from different models if we change around and play around with some of the parameters, we change the message, etc. Update the code when a new model is released or a new version is released that we want to test with. And of course, we can change the functionality by changing all of those parameters. Okay, my resources, if you would like to have a little play around with this yourself, the QR code points to my blog post. So I've got like a dev.to blog post which will explain to you step by step how to do all of this stuff if you decide that you'd like to give it a little go yourself. My code is also within that blog post as well. Once again, it doesn't cost you very much to do. My book recommendation, if you have been playing with Python or you're starting out with it or you're interested in it, this is a really good book all about data cleaning with Python. And Python is, of course, the language of the cloud, and I'm always keen to learn more and more about it. So it's got, this book in particular has got loads of information about how to clean and prepare data for analysis. And Python itself provides loads of different tools and libraries that are dedicated to dealing with data. So things like pandas, NumPy, matplotlib, which is a really cool one, allowing you to create different graphs and visualize your data for analysis, prepare it, make it more useful, that kind of thing. So this book, I've actually got a copy of it here if anyone wants to have a little look at it. It's really good, and if you're like me and you like to step away from the screen sometimes, it's nice to get your hands on the book sometimes. Yeah, and it includes loads of practical exercises and sample code that you can try out. And with what I've shown you today, you can absolutely use this kind of a book to try things out using that Cloud9 IDE. And there's a link for it as well. So that's kind of it from me. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for all your participation and your questions and everything. And yeah, please go ahead, yeah.
Hi there, thanks a lot for the talk. In terms of the data you're submitting, obviously, so there's two kind of elements to this. Firstly, would it be able to pick up something like commercially sensitive information? And then secondly, is it then training the LLM on the data you're submitting?
No, it's not. If you're using Amazon Bedrock and you're using the services that they provide, one of the things that they state as their code of conduct and the way that they operate is that they're not training their models, or the vendor, like Anthropic, is not training the models on your data, because that data is not going to Anthropic. It's actually going to an instance of Anthropic that's running within AWS and effectively belonging to you, in the same way that if you put your data into an S3 bucket, that's private to you as well, unless you make it public.
Then the final bit of it, would this be considered robust enough for something like round tripping?
No, I don't really know what round tripping is.
It's when you have to redact information for like legal purposes.
Okay.
And then you have to remove things like metadata or other data you can use to trace it back to what it originally was.
I see. Okay. I think that you would need to look into that underlying. Okay, what is the large language model doing as part of that service?
Right.
So Anthropic Claude certainly does state that PII removal is one of its functions. But I don't know. You'd have to try it. And But I think also there's like rigorous testing needed for anything that you're going to trust to do this for you, really. And as there is required for every single AI thing that we put out there. And I think that's kind of the reason why we should all learn about it, is because we can't trust machines to do the right thing all the time. And ultimately it's software. So we have to be aware of the pitfalls.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for really, really elegant example there. I'm just interested in terms of if you've tested this out on kind of longer passages with more PII in there, and what's the I guess the reliability of it? Do you find that Claude sometimes redacts parts of text that actually aren't PII or confidential, and do you find that sometimes it misses some? Just interested as to.
Yes, I did find it missed when I was first experimenting with it. I found that it missed my name in the beginning. But I wondered if that's to do with having a name that's not, maybe it didn't recognize my name. Faye is not maybe a name that it knew of, but imagine I mean, a lot of these, they're trained in the beginning using English. If your name was not recognizable to an English speaker, potentially that could be something that falls through the cracks. But I think also a lot of this is to do with the way that we prompt these things and the way that we ask them to do these tasks. Because, you know, we're not asking these models to do something for us as an expert. We're still the ones asking it to actually do the task. So we have to, in some ways, I think, provide examples sometimes to say, okay, this is the kind of response I want to see, and I don't want you ever to show me like a name that's, you know, a person's name, or I don't ever want to see something that's in the format of an address, and an address that looks like this format. I think we have to be very, very prescriptive with some of these models in order to get the results that we want. Because we've all tried to get, like, if you think about the first time you ever tried to get one of these models to create an image for you, I mean, I've seen some pretty insane images. Almost doing the opposite of what we asked for. Like, do not show this and do not show that, and then you get something that shows exactly what you asked not to show. So I think that sometimes we have to treat these things as maybe like a very, very enthusiastic intern who really wants to do the best, but sometimes just gets it wrong. So we have to bear in mind that it's not God. It doesn't know everything.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Again, really interesting talk. Do you know or have a sense of how effective it is using a language model is compared to using a more traditional language technique, such as named entity recognition? Good question. I'm not suggesting that this is going to be better. I think everything in IT, there's like 50,000 different ways to do everything in IT, and I think that we have to think about the specific requirements of our use case. One of the great things about Claude is it supports loads of different languages, so potentially that should make it better at understanding addresses that are not UK addresses or USA addresses, that kind of thing. But yeah, I think it all depends on your use case, and nothing in IT is ever easy, is it? Otherwise, we wouldn't have architects, would we?
Hi. Just real quick about the Cloud9 infrastructure. What does that add that just deploying on an EC2 instance or a football stadium would not allow for already?
You could absolutely do it on another EC2 instance. The reason I use Cloud9 is because you can do exactly what I did, and it's going to work for you. You can look at my blog post, and you can go through the step-by-step, follow exactly my steps, and it will work for you. If I said to you, "Oh, just spin up an IDE," you could use any one you like. It's a bit of a free-for-all, isn't it? But absolutely, you could spin up your own EC2 instance, put on Boto 3 on there, and get it all up and running. You wouldn't need to use the Cloud9 IDE at all, but you'd need to probably use a text editor, which would be a bit annoying unless you like Vi. I do, but not everyone does. You could just use VS Code, do it on there. But unfortunately, I heard that they're discontinuing Cloud9 in about 6 months. It's going to go. It's very sad. They obviously wasn't paying, and a lot of people had your opinion. Do it on somewhere else.
Yeah, thank you very much. And a nice, really simple, lovely example. I'm curious about differential privacy. So where you replace the data with data which has the same distribution, so that you can then use that data.
Anonymize. Yeah.
Is that something that is available in AWS?
I think that you could ask it in the message, because in my code I wrote replace all of the addresses with XXX. Potentially, you could put in the message replace the names with another random name, replace the addresses with another random address, or something like that. You're in charge. Amazon Comprehend. Yeah, Comprehend actually doesn't support as many languages. So if you wanted, that's one big difference between, absolutely, you can do some of this stuff with different services, but if you were doing it in, I don't know, Japanese, Comprehend wouldn't be able to necessarily support that.
Right, any other question?
Thank you for the talk. I've got two questions. Does this use case work with other models? If I want to use, for example, a local model or cheaper, for example, like Gemini, would that work as well?
You could try it. To my knowledge, for the models that I looked at, the ones that are available on AWS, the Claude ones are the ones that supported PII, and that was the use case that I was interested in at the time. But if you could find another model that would do it, you could try. But I really think that in order to trust something, you need to be pretty certain that it's going to deliver what you're expecting. Probably want it to be correct 99% of the time. You don't want false negatives, false positives for certain use cases.
Perfect. Thank you.
But I would suggest we could try it, absolutely.
Right. Any other person? Okay, thank you very much, Faye.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. You were brilliant. Thank you.
That was a brilliant session. Thank you very much.